Hello. I figure it's got to be Led Zeppelin because it was my first show and it completely blew my mind. You know, I was a big fan, and I was living in Austin, Texas, and the show was coming up in Houston, and my aunt, who at the time was about 62 or 63 years old, agreed to go down to the Summit to pick up tickets for me. She was about 5 blocks away in line when they sold out, so it looked like I wasn't going to get to go. Then a friend of mine's parents' friends had a daughter who worked at a radio station in Dallas, and she had just interviewed them, and she scammed us some tickets. And so we went to see Led Zeppelin, April 21st, 1977. I remember walking into the arena, and there was no opening band, but you know, the lights are on it, and you could see the stage with John Bonham's clear yellow drum set and Jimmy Page's little Zoso amp, and I just was really excited. And you know, I was thinking, God damn, they're in the building right now. Visually, you know, except for John Bonham, Led Zeppelin wasn't much to look at unless, you know, like you like the worn spot of Robert Plant's dick or whatever. There's nice little floofy blouses, and you know, Led Zeppelin would be just fine for a blind person. On No Quarter, there was this like long piano solo, this sort of boogie-woogie piano solo on grand piano, where the other guys had left the stage. And hearing a grand piano that loud is really, really cool. And then there was a part when Bonham did his little drum solo, or his big drum solo. It was really long. The lights were off on the rest of the stage. You couldn't see that the other guys, they had left the stage, and then they had come back, but you couldn't see that they were there. And all of a sudden, his drum solo finished, and the lights came on screamingly loud, or bright, and they broke into Kashmir. And man, I got chills. It was just incredible. The crowd went fucking crazy. It's a good bragging, you know, first concert. You know, Led Zeppelin was my first concert. And the only person I know of who I think beats it is a friend, Lisa Rusk, whose first concert was the Beatles. Somebody else saw Elvis Presley, but yeah, who cares?
When I was about 8 years old, one of my first experiences with music was going up to my brother's bedroom and opening up, you know, I wasn't even supposed to go in there, and finding his records in there, and he had a little record player. It was actually a pretty nice one, and put on a, I think it was the second Led Zeppelin record. Put it on, and I think it was the second side, it was that song Heartbreaker, and it had that riff, you know, down, and I was like, wow, this is great. And I just like really responded something, you know, there was something like really impulsive that I responded to. Oh, so it's gonna be like the chair. I think I remember playing air guitar before air guitar was ever even a word. And my brother walked in and he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I guess I'm pretending I'm playing guitar. Exactly. For me, it was a whole new thing. I mean, it was like everybody else was listening to like, I don't know what, Donnie Marie. Years later, when people started playing air guitar, I was like, that's what I was doing. There's a name for it. That was probably, when I think of a moment, that's one of the first musical moments, and it all kind of stems from there, really. And I never thought I'd tell anybody that story. I don't think I ever told anybody, except you.
I've been taking shots of the chair.
Well, I think my first thing that I really remember in terms of a live music performance were like totally obscure experiences I had when I was a kid with my dad. like going to see this jazz trio. My dad used to go to this lounge, you know, and there was some piano trio there, and they were playing totally straight ahead stuff, you know, it was in Florida. But, you know, I really liked it. It was the first time first place I'd ever heard jazz, particularly live, you know, and it was great, you know. And the other one would be, we would go to these flea markets in Virginia, and there would be like a whole bunch of guys like sitting on the back of a truck with fiddles and banjos and stuff and just jamming. It was kind of just the only thing that really stuck with me in terms of like being young and seeing music. I mean, you know, I went to concerts and stuff like that, but I don't know, those were the things because they just seemed really real. They were, you know, I was standing right next to the people and or sitting very close, you know. I don't know, it just seemed a lot more real. So it really kind of started making me itch a little bit to play some music. And I kind of wanted to play bass. I've always wanted to play bass. I've never had one or anything, and I saw a bass for sale in a yard sale, and I bought it, and it was like, that's what I should have been doing all along, you know? I feel like I've finally gotten around to doing what I really want to do.
Back in Sneedville on Saturday, we worked till 12 o'clock on the farm. Then on Saturday evening, we'd go downtown, stay a while till I'd have to summer ride. When I was home, we didn't have a car or a truck. We just had a wagon and a sled and 2 horses, all we had. And I'd get down there and some of the boys to have their car radios turned on. And I said, "You listening to the Grand Ole Opry?" And I said, "Do you mind if I stand here and listen at it too with you guys?" And listen for Bill Monroe till he'd go on and come off. And then I'd get away from the car, and about time, that would be about 7:30 or 8 o'clock, about 10 o'clock he'd come on again. I'd be back at that same car wanting to hear him play hear Bill on the Grand Ole Opry. And Lester and Earl, that was one of the greatest bands I've ever heard. Well, it's so great that every one of them knew what the other one was doing, and they backed each other up right, and there's close harmony on their singing, and the music was together. It's so much together back then, and the way I used to have it when I was on Wheeling, it's and the way Bill and Lester and Earl had it and Chubby all together, it fits so good. Everybody played together. And today they try to outplay each other, see which one can play the harder, the fanciest break, or more licks on the mandolin, more licks on the banjo, and it don't fit like it did back then. You know, or I don't think it does. You know, I thought when one take a break, the other would back him up, it just sounds so good.
Well, like a lot of people my age, some of my earliest exposure to rock music came on the Ed Sullivan Show. That's where I first heard the Beatles, and I didn't have any older brothers or sisters, so kind of was finding out for music by myself. And Sunday night, whatever the one group they would have on, the Animals, the Rolling Stones, the Kinks, Byrds, Dave Clark 5. I remember hearing them on the Ed Sullivan Show, and but my parents were very anti me having a transistor radio. I think the image of the teenager walking down the street with the transistor radio held up to the ear was a very precise image for my mom in particular, who didn't want her son doing that. And so the radio was something that I knew was out there, but it was kind of cut off for me. And then one day, I was running errands with my dad. We had gone what seemed like really far, so I'm sure it was like a half an hour by car. And on the way home, I was allowed to listen to the radio. And I don't recall whether I frequently asked to put on the radio. I feel like I probably did and was usually told no.
but would ask anyway. And this day, the answer was yes. Immediately after that, I started buying 45s, and you know, based on every song I was hearing on the radio, or the ones that were getting me most excited. So the first single I bought, which I heard that day in the car, was Ruby Tuesday, and the second one was Return of the Red Baron by the Royal Guardsmen. Georgie Girl was sold out. I mean, I remember this so vividly, and never could find a store that, I guess you couldn't keep Georgie Girl in stock, so I never did get that 45. And then followed by a flurry of Penny Lane, and I Think We're Alone Now by Tommy James and the Shondells, and the 59th Street Bridge song Feeling Groovy by the Harper's Bazaar. Right, that was the Harper's Bazaar. And which that one actually hadn't heard that day. That was purchased on the recommendation of my friend Eric. So. I stand by all those purchases to this day. Subsequent purchases, you know, I can look back and cringe about. And I remember loathing Can't Take My Eyes Off of You, going out of my head, that medley by Frankie Valli. So I wasn't indiscriminate, but probably pretty close. And then I was allowed to have a radio after that. I mean, for some reason, it changed.
Every night we'd go to bed and we'd put a record album on, and it would usually be Partridge Family First Side, and we'd fall asleep to that music, and it was just really lovely and great. But then something kind of changed when Tommy came out, the movie Tommy, and I went to see it with Joyce Trannis in 7th or 8th grade, and all the other kids in the theater were sort of talking during it, and I was just really transfixed by it, and I couldn't believe how much it was just impacting me, not just visually, because, you know, it's a really, really stupid movie, and even then I knew it was a really, really stupid movie. But the music was awesome. It was, you know, it was rock music like I've never heard in my whole life, with great instrumentation and vocals and everything, just this whole package. It was just more art than packaged music, which is what I had been listening to my whole life. And the next day I went into my jewelry drawer where the babysitting money was, and I walked to Sam Goody in the mall, and I bought my very first Who album, which is probably the worst Who album to buy because it was the Tommy version. It was the movie version of Tommy. I kind of fell in love with them. Like, I remember coming home and not being able to eat and thinking, something's happening to me, because I was only 12 or 13, and I remember feeling really different. Like, there are times in your life where you kind of, something internal happens to you and you notice a change. My room was covered, like off came all the fashion photography or whatever ripped out from magazines, lipstick ads, and up came Who posters everywhere. And I mean everywhere on the white paneled walls of my suburban bedroom in Philadelphia, PA. And it's not even like I wanted to like imitate Roger Daltrey swinging a microphone, or I wanted to imitate Pete Townsend doing a guitar. It wasn't like that kind of boy fantasy for me, you know, where I catch my brother like singing into a hairbrush to Jethro Tull in his bedroom. When I listened to this, you know, I was literally on my bed looking at the album, which was so freeing to me, growing up in just suburban Philadelphia where every house looked the same, and you were expected to grow up and do this at this age and that at that age, and that was it. And it kind of opened up everything for me as far as just being interested in new types of music and new ways of doing things.
I'm just going to talk to the camera about musical epiphanies. Kind of had a few over the years, you know, those moments when once it's happened, everything you do subsequently has a little piece of that moment in it forever after. I'm going to talk specifically about a record that came out about 20 years ago by Los Angeles band Wall of Voodoo. The record was called Call of the West. Somebody found that one for me. Somebody found Call of the West. It was drummer, a musician friend of mine, Rob Ellis, turned up at my house raving about this new record he bought, and kind of if he described it to me I would have probably never let him play it, because it kind of had everything that I didn't like about music at that time. This was 1982, maybe the beginning of 83, and I didn't like drum machines, didn't like synths, and I certainly didn't like country music. But suddenly I found myself listening to a country music that was played on synths and drum machines. I guess I would argue that Call of the West was the first alternative country record that was made. Certainly the most alternative one that's ever been made. It starts with 3 astonishing tracks, Tomorrow, Lost Weekend, and Factory. And when I first heard those tracks, I just had to keep playing the start of that record again and again, and then when I played it 100 times to myself, I had to go around and play it to everybody else. It was one of those records you had to force onto other people until they loved it almost as much as you did. And it was kind of the combination of people involved in that record. Stan Ridgway and his kind of warped tales of Americana, which 20 years ago weren't as cliched as they kind of become since. Chas T. Gray's really gritty, primitive synthesizer playing. Joe Nannini didn't really have a proper drum kit, he was just hitting bits of metal and springs and playing along to this 808 that was just programmed all wrong. It was just they must have had the speed turned up to maximum, like it was locked on maximum, so everything was just ridiculously fast, so they had to play at half speed to these crazy rhythms. It was just wrong somehow. And for me, most significantly, guitar player Mark Moreland, probably my favorite guitar player of all time. When I heard him come in on that first track on that record with this kind of twangy guitar sound, there was something about the rhythm and the tone and just the expression in the playing that I'd never heard. It was kind of everything that I wanted to hear a guitar do, and a lot of other stuff that I didn't even know guitars could do. I guess Wall of Voodoo were a punk rock band that were playing country music on synthesizers and drum machines, and that was what was so unique about it. It was one of those things that logic would tell you it shouldn't work, and it kind of never really did work for them after that. But in that one moment, that one album, something amazing happened. It just happened on that one record, and everything they did before was moving towards it, and everything that they did afterwards was somehow damaged by the fact that they'd already made their great record. You know, you don't come across records like that very often, not records that you know you can say, from the moment I first heard that, everything changed. And like the very first time I heard it, I knew it was special. You know, like when you hear something that's really amazing that first time, you don't like it, not that first time, because you're just taking it in, you're just absorbing it, and you're just like, something really special's happening here. I'm hearing something that I've never heard before, and I think I'm gonna love it, but I don't know yet. I can't tell because I have no frame of reference for it. I have to make this frame of reference. I guess it becomes its own frame of reference, and then you refer other things to that forever after, and that's what makes a classic record like that. There's one other thing that it's kind of stupid, but like even today, like whenever I go into a record shop, flick through the racks, whenever I do, I still kind of go to the W's and flick through and see if they have a copy of that record. It just makes me a little bit happier whenever I see one there and that you can still get that album. What a fool.
right, we're going. When I was in high school, I used to spend a lot of time in the art room, and it was, you know, it was kind of one of the arty people, I suppose. And one year we had a different teacher. The regular teacher took a year off, and so this other teacher was a bit more cosmopolitan, or he's a little more hip. I was probably 15 or 16. I won a prize. They had some kind of art prize at the end of the year, and I won for something. And the prize was a subscription to Heavy Metal magazine, which is a comic book, and it's kind of a science fiction fantasy comic book, but it's for adults, and so it has some nudity and stuff. So it's something I never would have bought on my own. I wouldn't even buy comic books for myself, but I was pretty excited about this prize and the subscription, and I liked the magazine a lot. The thing that was really new that was though that they had a music column in the magazine. This is probably 1980 or 1981, and reading the music column was how I found out about bands like The Residents, and I found out about Devo, and I found out about Kraftwerk, because you know, where I grew up, I was really kind of cut off from anything, and the kind of music that was around, I wasn't interested at all, and I thought rock music was just terrible and very boring, and Here at Last was some stuff that was interesting to me. That's when I really started listening to music, and started me, you know, on this path, and you know, it turned me on to a whole new world. Before then, I didn't really listen to music, and that was kind of the start of it. That I think that the heavy metal subscription.
I was searching everywhere for that one elusive event, record, or show that blew me away and inspired me to do what I'm doing today. Well, this gentleman here obviously inspired me because of the beauty of his voice and the incredible talent of his music. But he also inspired me because I realized that, well, this man cannot see the world, and yet he knows so much. And it just shows me that you don't need all your senses. It's not about listening to music or seeing the world in order to enjoy and participate and share love and peace or harmony or whatever we may have to give. Perception is also on a level of feeling, a level of intuition, something that we may not be able to explain in words, or we don't readily have a reason for why we sense something or perceive something, but it nevertheless is just as true and real. Listening to music is not something that you do for its own sake. You listen to music because you have a need for something. If I hear "Love's in need of love today," love's in need, it gives me chicken skin just to think those words. It means something. So it's not just the music. It can be anything that we perceive, whether audibly, visually, or sensually, or it is everything that we choose to pay attention to. You could be cleaning the toilet and enjoy the fact that the result is a clean toilet on which everyone will be comfortable to sit on or to use in whatever way they choose to use it. It's clean, and you've made that clean, and that's an enjoyable process. If I allow myself to interact in a positive way with it, it gives me something positive. The little I can do, I do, and if I can't do anything, then at least I can sing a song.
It's like 14 years old or something. was super into jazz when I was young. I just went to the Jazz Fest. I sat pretty close to the front of the stage. I really didn't know who was playing that night or anything. I decided to go. All of a sudden, from out of the wings, there was this sound. And before I knew what was happening, there were like, what seemed like 50 or 100 people running on stage with drums and all this sound going off and people dressed in like purple robes. I was like completely terrified, you know? And it was the purple robes that was terrifying me. I don't know why. Maybe it has some connotation with some other worldly shit or something. So this dude comes running out in a purple robe and fire is shooting out of his mouth. The sound was coming through the speakers and I felt like it was pushing me back in my chair. I don't know how they talked the city into having it that loud. I was 14 years old. The only thing I knew about, you know, music really was the few records I had in my record collection at home. I remember just the sound of this and the look of this just completely blowing me away. People are running around. Then the great Sun Ra comes walking out, decked out in this gold shimmering outfit, and sits down at his organ and just rocks this chord. Then it all made sense. I mean, the initial fear turned into just elation, you know. It was such a joyous experience from then on. I think at one point I was on my chair, you know, standing on my chair, you know, just cheering, because it was such a fantastic experience. It's like, man, you know, this is what I have to do. I want to do this. But that first minute, you know, I've never had a minute like that. I still have fear, you know, from that show. I wonder if everyone's going to talk about Sun Ra.
Are we going?
Yep, anytime you're ready, I'm ready.
The first time Bettina wanted to talk about this project was quite a while ago, and we started thinking about some of those ideas back before the winter, and I thought that it was an enormous project to try and pinpoint out one or two of these wonderful moments that you've had, or records that you have, which is even harder, and see how they affected or changed your life. But I think that one of the most memorable and fun times of my life was when I was first starting to look into being a sound engineer. I was interested in doing live sound, and I wanted to study with a company and be an apprentice. So I got a job working for Pravda and started working here in Chicago doing sound. And luckily, I got to pick some of the first shows I got to do. So the very first show I got to work as a sound engineer doing monitors was a Sun Ra show. And I couldn't have been a bigger fan of Sun Ra, so that was really an incredible thing to get the okay for. We were setting up doing sound check, and we checked everybody in the band, and it took them a long time to get ready for sound check because they all had these enormous stacks of sheet music that they were rifling through, putting them in order, trying to see which song they were going to play first, and that seemed really unbelievable that they even knew what they were going to play next in that kind of band. So I thought that was going to be really like an impossible task for the musician. And so we just kind of hung out and like did like a line check while they were all setting up, and then right before the sound check started, Sun Ra came in and he went to go walk up on stage, and I was just at the monitor console, and he put his hand on my shoulder, and it was just such an incredible weight that he pushed on my arm as he went to climb the stairs to get on stage. And as he walked up on stage, he just like looked me in the eye so sharply, proceeded up onto stage, sat at the piano, and when Gary asked to do the sound check, he just sat there and he wouldn't play at all. And then finally one of his somebody came over and like tried to help him out with sound check, and they just kind of like picked his hands up and flopped him onto the piano, and he just kind of like went done. The evening kind of started out slow, where he let the band go up on stage, and he stopped by the soundboard on his way up, and he had this little bottle of perfume, which you should smell. It's called Black Magic. And you put this little perfume on, a little Black Magic. He left this on the monitor console. He left it there for me or for whoever needed it. He set it down. He went up on stage and he was wearing like a big cape. And he had to maneuver between all the stands of music, and all the musicians just stepped back. And they were trying to like keep their music sheets from blowing because there was this constant wind that was separating all of the space around him. And it was this delicious evening where he just walked to the piano and he sat down, and it was incredible because he was just so on. He couldn't have been more, like he must have just saved up all his energy for this one moment. The performance was spectacular. And the musicians, everybody in his band are just rifling through their sheet music. And Sun Ra only had one sheet on his piano, like that he was playing from. And I never got to see what that was because he was on the whole other side of the stage. So after the end of this incredible show, I walked over there to help clean up and like get him off stage and stuff. And the sheet that he left is the sheet I can't find, but it's deep inside this archive of a house. And it was one piece of paper that said, "This world is not my home." I thought that was hilarious because I expected him to show up with the bulk of the brain in a written format after seeing all of his musicians prepared for this one event. So he got up on stage, you know, played this incredible show. It was completely bizarre, and at the end of the night, I was left with this one scrap of paper, a pile of memories, and a bottle of Black Magic perfume. The notes I had written down on the side of my monitor chart sheet said, "The air is full of invisible bolts, and there's no path to the civilized world." It was this incredible night where the magic of what was happening in present tense preceded all other events, and nothing could compare to it. At the end of the night, I just thought, like this is kind of like what I've been saving up for, to kind of like work towards, and this was like the top of the top. And you know, that kind of inspired me to take on an interest in doing sound, but it was really just an interest in music. I think there's something really inspirational of a transient moment in time, especially when it's not being recorded, it's only being experienced. And that really set a good impression on me that one particular night, because I felt like this was the type of moment that lets you see something that you wouldn't have seen normally in life, and lets you feel as if there's another world out there that you can be a part of. You can be a musician, you can be a part of putting things together. Either way, you're helping make things happen. And I thought that was it was just kind of a fun evening for me. And after that, I started doing a lot more work, and I was just really revved up to go see a bunch more shows. And I've seen that type of moment happen in so many different places at so many different times. It's always been really difficult to, especially thinking now about those moments that were like a complete epiphany that you had at a show, where you had to step back from yourself and like question everything you do and question what it's for. And you know, from that time on, I've just been really interested and involved, and especially in the whole Chicago scene, because there's so many great musicians here. And when Thrill Jockey came here, it was just like a really incredible opportunity for everybody to be a part of something, and for everybody's stuff to be heard. So happy 10 years.
Shit, what am I going to talk about? Well, I guess I could talk about that one. You know, that was a pretty major moment, I think. That was a pretty major moment. You know, of discovery, you know, I think. Yeah, I think that's a good thing. How it is, you know, I guess the cool thing about it is then when you think of somebody like Melanie, who I knew as a child as, you know, Brand New Key, what a kind of goofy little stupid song, and then you know, a couple of years ago I had the single, you know, and I listened to the flip side. I never had listened to it before. I was listening to a bunch of singles, you know, and then I just flipped it over, and immediately it was just like, oh, holy shit. This is the way, this is what I've been looking for. For 20 years I've been looking for this thing. Something that touches me like this. And it climbed in me, you know, it just so climbed in me immediately. It was like, this is my tattoo. This is my tattoo right here. I don't need a freaking another tattoo. I've been wanting another tattoo, but I don't need no other tattoo. This is my tattoo. It's burned in my soul. I see it every time I look in the mirror. I don't have to have it for other people to look at. This is my power. This is my aspirin and my you know, 1984 pill, all at the same time. As a rock and roll musician, music is sort of like, it's our clothes we wear, and it is our wallpaper and our couch and everything, but it's also our Bible and our, as a rock and roller, you know, rock is the Bible, and rock is the rock. I mean, I build my whole creative world on, and it's so fantastic when you find a Bible out there. It's like, oh my God, it was sitting here in my record collection forever. I've listened to the other side of this single for my entire life. My entire life I've been listening to the other side of this single. I never flipped it over. And one day I just flipped it over, and there was this whole world of a whole nother world. It's like a parallel universe of goodness and greatness and everything that I need. It's the thing about the music. It's a shot in the arm.
I know I'm not in danger.
Okay, the most inspirational moment for me musically was at a show at Northwestern University in April of 2001, and at that time I wasn't sure if I was going to continue doing music or if I was going to stop doing music, because I really had problems with some of the things the effects that music has on people inside of negative ways, and I was seeing a lot of the negativity in music. And we did a show at Northwestern, and at the end of the show, we did a song called Appreciate Life, which is on the second All Natural album. And that song is the first time that lyrically I think that I really said in a song what I really want to say and what I really should be saying. And I could tell from what the response from the people was at the show. We did it a cappella, and from the call and response, that I could tell that people really felt the song, they really felt what I was saying. And I felt like I really connected with people inside of a positive way, so that was a really inspirational moment for me to let me know that you can do positive things with music.
Around the time when I first started touring, and something in me being the most patriotic person you can find, I had decided I was going to be in Iceland forever. And it was a paradise and everything else was evil. Around age 7, maybe, I started becoming just a little bit curious about what the foreigners out there are doing. Coming from Iceland, you didn't see many bands play live. And I can literally tell you that Led Zeppelin came to Iceland '72, and then Stranglers came '77, and then I think Boy George came '83. So it's every 5 years we would get one foreign band. That was it. When I started traveling with the Supercubes in '87, '88, I would start going to live shows, and I was completely disappointed. It was just like sort of sad rock clubs with a lot of beer drinking and bad smell and people playing music with absolutely no hope in it. It was just about repeating the old legendary sort of rock things, and things were pretty dull, if you ask me. Then I started going to clubs instead. Sort of acid places in England, for example, and then rap clubs. And there would be similar experience, like there would be all those acid house tunes, or rave tunes, or whatever you call them. And there would be one band that always stuck its head and shoulders above the rest. And I'd be like, oh, what song is that? And I would ask the DJ, and it would always be the same band, 808 State. And there was this song called Cupid that they did, which was just the most genius of all. And it was just so rude and so full of energy and optimism. And this kind of noise with a guitar that it was just completely abstract how it was dealt with. At the same time, like I said, I was going to rap clubs, and there'd be all those rap bands or hip hop stuff, and it'd all be pretty good. And once in a while, there'd be this kind of one thing that stuck its head and shoulders above everything else. And it'd be Rebel Without a Cause with Public Enemy. And it was actually the year, I think, also of the car alarm. So you would kind of, I don't really know if you remember the first couple of years, people had car alarms that just didn't know how to work them. So at any given point, you would always hear like at least one car alarm. I remember my son, he was 2 years